to another episode of Let's Review Stargate with Layla and you, a Stargate rewatch where we love the show deeply, question it freely, and have a lot to say about both. And I'm happy to have you here. For me, these Stargate stories matter, not just because they're full of sci-fi silliness and big explosions, though we get that too, but because they hold our stories, which makes this show both entertaining and educational in all of the best storytelling ways. So let's see what holds up, what doesn't, and what hits differently when we watch it from today's perspective. Alright, let's talk Stargate and see where it takes us. Season finale time, people. It's about to get real in oh so many ways. First off, the episode deeds. The story was written by James Crocker, and this was apparently the only episode for Stargate SG-1 that he ever wrote. The teleplay was by Jonathan Glasner. The episode was directed by David Worry Smith, and the original air date was March 6, 1998. And apparently, I did not know this episode has multiple versions, but more on that later. At its core, this finale asks what honorable people do when those in power fail the very job that they were meant to do, protect and serve the public, and in this case, all of Earth. This episode shows us an SG-1 at its most honorable when the stakes are high, while giving us a boatload of action, pulling at our heartstrings, and throwing in plenty of humor to boot, because let's be real, SG-1 stays funny, or in my opinion gets all the more funny, especially under pressure. So let's dive in and review this episode called Within the Serpent's Grasp. What do American government agencies do when the plug is pulled? Shred everything. As we see General Hammond do at the opening of this episode as O'Neill walks into his office. Hammond reminds us that before he started the SGC, he was only a month away from his retirement, and considering how long we will be enjoying his leadership, spoiler, clearly the man loved Stargate Command and what it stood for. And all the better for us, for he is and will always remain my favorite leader of the SGC. He is such an inspirational character. I also really liked he didn't take shutting down the Stargate program lying down, as he confesses to an O'Neill that apparently he went back to Senator Kinsey twice and had to be forcibly removed a second time. My man! He also went to the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Chiefs, and the President, who was supposedly a great supporter of the Stargate program, but when push came to shove, he folded like a cheap suit. But yeah, what are you gonna do? Politicians are gonna politicize, as the president claimed he couldn't do anything to stop its shutdown because he couldn't jeopardize his seat of power, which instantly makes me think, what a knob, unworthy of his office. If ever there's a moment to stand up and fight for something, and if necessary, fall for it, this one been it, mister. But, as always, you have to commend the show for showing how it is, in comparison to what could be, and in my opinion, should be. For this is how it goes, isn't it? Well, now we've seen what the evil production of this looks like, with Trump just throwing out the handbook and doing whatever the fuck he wants, and somehow still seeming to find support. And even when Congress and the court system tells him, you're not allowed to do that, it doesn't seem to stop him. So you could say, in an awful way, it did show us you could go against the grain, and in this case, there will always be people dumb enough or cowardly enough to follow you right along, at least for a little while. Long enough to make a real difference, be it for good or evil, you can get a lot done. I just wish people using it for good would do this more. You know, stop playing nice, because clearly they don't, so, you know. But hey, history's on our side, right? These men might change the world for a little while, a few years, possibly a few decades, and the effects last for many generations. But in the end, somewhere, at least for a little while, we seem to learn our lesson. But I digress. Back to Stargate. A defeated Hammond ends his speech to O'Neill saying that the Stargate will be buried literally and figuratively, and all I can add to this, again! They're gonna bury it again! You did it before! Remember what I said in the last episode about how we did this dance 50 years ago, and yet here we find ourselves? That fucker just won't stay buried, people, so you might as well learn how to use it, and use it well! And that is what hurts here. Hammond did what a good leader should do. He fought tooth and nail for the continuation of the Stargate program, and it still wasn't enough. Next, we see Daniel in the control room, and he still hasn't seen the optometrist, I guess, because we see him here again without his glasses. Did Michael break the glasses or something? SG-1 is now gathered, and they're having their secret little powwow in the control room. Teal'c once again states he has to leave if they're going to bury the gate. Daniel says he too wants to leave, but not to run and hide for safety. No. He wants to go to the coordinates he got in the alternate reality. And this is where Daniel poses the all-important question. If we don't go through now and the Goa'uld attack later, how are you gonna feel? Because that is really what it all boils down to. SG-1 has pushed against the system before, but this time is different. The gate is being buried, the Stargate program is shut down, and they're being told to stand down in the face of a threat they know is real. They either obey and hope that they're wrong, or they cross it fully and deal with whatever consequences follow. And that is what makes this such a powerful scene, not just for the team, but for us too as viewers, because it asks us, when the system tells you to ignore what you know is real, what you know is right, do you stay obedient, or do you recognize the moment when obedience becomes complicity? And this is oh so very hard hitting, especially right now. We are all posed with this question. What are we going to do? Are we going to let the people up top continue on the way they are, despite many of us aware enough to know that this is going to lead to a shit ton of trouble for all of us? Or are we going to stand up and do something about it? And that's why it always makes me so happy to see, sadly though, that this was necessary for it to happen. But now things are getting so dire for so many. A lot of people are standing up. A lot of people are drawing that line and saying no more and act on it. I'm so proud of us. Carter, who now asks a question on all of our minds, I imagine. How are the four of them going to be able to stop an all-out assault? I'm guessing the writers kind of guessed that we would have that question too. For they addressed this by having Daniel point out that they'd have a better chance now than once the attack on Earth has already begun, which is a fair point. But still, four people? Not good odds. I mean, they're good and all, but okay. It is science fiction after all. Silk adds that these coordinates aren't on the cartouche they found on Abydos, thereby alluding to the fact that the Goa'uld wouldn't know to expect them, which I thought was a bit of a stretch, no? For Apophis knows the Tauri have been to Abydos, but this still felt like a rather big assumption. To me, it just showed that the attack will originate from a planet not under Ra's domain, which would make sense, seeing that our main protagonist now is Apophis and not Ra. Yet, also, with Tilk as Apophis's first prime, wouldn't he know all there is to know about Apophis's strongholds? I mean, it's been only, what, like 10 months since Tilk defected. They can't have built entire planetary bases unbeknownst to the person who, for all intents and purposes, was Apophis's top general, could they? Or maybe Apophis accounted for that and went with the world unbeknownst to Tilk? Okay, I'm definitely starting to overthink this. But I mean, like, what do y'all think? Did this part make sense to you? Or did I, like, poke a hole in their logic here? If so, I'm sorry? Not really? Maybe a little? Like, again, once I really delve deep into these episodes and I start to think through what it means, this argument kind of fell flat to me. But seeing that it's technically not even really relevant to the rest of the episode, let's move on. Now, I don't know if Tilk said this on purpose, but when he goes, I believe a medical attack could be successful, O'Neill can't help but correct him and say surgical attack, which made me wonder if Tilk did this to draw O'Neill back into the discussion. If so, well played, my man, well played. For it now also leads O'Neill to answer Daniel's earlier question by stating, I'd feel like an idiot. If they'd stand down now and the Goa'uld attack later, he'd feel like an idiot, and yeah, you could almost say that Daniel's question was kind of rhetorical. It's good that he gave it a really big think. Informed consent, people, it's a thing. And in this episode, when you really think about it, it's a really big thing. For with O'Neill now convinced, and Daniel and Tilk already in, all three men turn expectantly to Carter. To his credit, though, O'Neill does ease some of that pressure by saying that he won't order Carter to go. And not under these circumstances, no you cannot. But it didn't stop me from thinking the moment they all turned to her, no pressure, sweetie. But of course, as our beloved SG-1, they're all deciding to go no matter the costs, because how could they not, with literally the fate of the world in their hand? And I wanted to delve a little deeper into that, for each of them makes this choice of their own volition and why that matters, because every single one of them has something of significance to lose. Well, their lives, of course, for one. But beyond that, O'Neill and Carter risk courts-martial and the careers that they've spent decades building. Daniel, I imagine, would disappear into some military black hole prison, never to be seen again, which is all the more chilling when you remember that the rest of the world already thinks that he is dead, so they, yeah, would totally be able to do that and get away with it. But let's not forget Tilk. They would ship him off to Area 51 in a heartbeat and turn him into their new favorite test subject. Not a fate I wish on anyone. And despite all of that, they still decide to go. And that is what makes them heroes, in my opinion. They don't just show courage in battle, which we have seen, but they have the moral awareness and clarity to act even or especially when doing the right thing may cost them everything. It is truly righteousness in all of its beautiful glory. I've touched upon this one in the last episode as well, but I do believe it deserves repeating, for Tilk in all of his calm and quiet demeanor shows us such strength and honorability, I feel it requires a special shout out. Standing down would mean the end of his life's purpose. They might very well turn him into a test subject at Area 51. If they do decide to bury the gate, and they would allow him to go through before they did that, it would still mean a lifetime of running, hiding, and most likely having to forfeit his attempts of freeing the Jaffa. So yes, while the others are weighing also a significant amount of danger, for Tilk it means losing any real future, period. And sadly, that is a layer we don't see them fully acknowledge. Possibly too dark. But hey, you know me. I love to go deep and dark. For reals though, if you think about it, despite all of that hanging in the balance for him, he never makes it about himself. He doesn't pressure the team to act, he doesn't plead his own case, and that's what gives his calm such power here. It shows us the man that he is, once again. I mean, Cry, beautiful episode, made me fall in love with him oh so deeply, oh so fully once again. But this, I never noticed this before until I really delved deeper into this episode. Shows us an insight into the kind of character that he is. The writers may have decided not to delve too deeply into the darkness, yet I felt compelled to really shine a light on this beautiful, beautiful man and give him the proper respect that he so clearly deserves. I mean, hey, y'all wrote him. Give the man his props. As SG-1 prepares to leave, they send the map through first, which is smart. They may be acting rash, but they ain't dumb. Apparently it is dark on the other side, and I saw someone online point out how weird that is, for the room would have been lit up by the reflection from the connected wormhole, which is oh so true. We actually see this in a few minutes, as Jackson dials the gate to send the map back to Earth. So it was a nice addition, maybe to show off that they finally installed infrared on the map or something. But in this case, it actually, if you thought about it for a second, didn't make much sense. But nice showing off a new gadget. We see SG-1 quickly race through the gate as Hammond and his men chase them all the way into the gate room. And hey look! Major Ferretti! Apparently we haven't seen the last of him, which I kind of thought was, Children of the Gods, so my bad. Sorry. From what I could tell now, this really is the last time that we see him. So for a season finale to call one of the earlier characters back again is a nice touch, although we never really got to bond with Ferretti, right? So he is the one that saw the coordinates to Chulak that got this whole thing rolling where we met Tilk and yada yada yada. So, okay, granted, give the man his props, but I like what they did with him in this episode. Let's leave it at that. For now, Lord have mercy, only now we've reached the theme song. This was like the first 5 minutes of the episode, which was strong. I was hooked. But then again, I've been hooked this entire season, which is why we're doing this. I can imagine, after people not at all liking the last episode, if y'all stopped watching after that, you missed out on a good one. Your loss. After the theme song, as always, we see the names of the actors appearing in this episode. Seeing the name Peter Williams always let me know this episode was going to be a goodie, for he's the actor that played Apophis. Funnily enough, Peter Williams himself has said that he never knew when, how, or if he'd be back, but seeing Serpent in the episode's title was a dead giveaway that it would be an episode featuring Apophis, aka him, which was a good deduction because I think that is actually the case. Every title for this entire show that has Serpent in it has Apophis in it. I like that he noted that himself too. And when they now also show Alexis Cruz coming back as Skaara, we really know this is going to be a great episode. Yet in later years, as people have become more and more aware of the actors' names, this became a bit of a thorn in the side of studios, no doubt. I remember on Supernatural, they had to hide certain return guest stars' credits to show up only at the end of the episode, because by now so many viewers were so familiar with the actors' names, it could ruin plot twists. Which, smart. And I kind of want to say good on us, for being so involved that we pay attention to these things. But I can imagine it sometimes can be a hassle for the writers, directors, and even the actors. Everyone these days is filming everywhere, so you really need to hide your shit well to not give away awesome plot twists. And we do so love the unexpected plot twists, but I also really love seeing some actors' names pop up, thereby instantly knowing that this was going to be a good episode. How do y'all feel about that? Show the name and get a little spoiled? Or leave it for the end of the episode and be really, really, really surprised? As I'm looking around at the shipping containers, we are introduced to a new Goa'uld weapon, the Zat'n'ktels, or in true O'Neillism, a Zat gun. Now, I know over time the writers and actors started to hate this thing, but I loved it, in addition to those clunky staff weapons. But according to director Joseph Malazzi, they made them do too many things, writing themselves into a corner. One squeeze opens it, another shoots a high voltage energy blast, which I think you can equate to basically like a taser. 2 shots will kill most people. It's not really a good quantifier, but sure. And as we later learn, apparently 3 shots disintegrate. Handy! Very handy, seriously, if you don't want to deal with cleanup, ta-da! I really, really love this next part. I don't know who came up with this concept, but it makes me laugh every single fucking time. As Tilk is explaining to them how the Zat gun works, we hear something gearing up, and suddenly everyone, except Tilk, falls down. I mean, okay, Tilk wobbles like a little bit. I found that funny, especially when they do it again later on. I don't know what those Jaffa got, but it's something. The only thing I can think to add to that is we all know how wide Tilk's stance. I'm just saying, make of that what you will. As Carter starts to hypothesize it was a planetary shift, it apparently makes Tilk realize something, though he is not nice enough to share that with the group. He just advises them to dial home immediately, so I kind of really wonder what he was thinking of, but okay. This is where they discover that the Stargate no longer working, and I've always just love Daniel's uh-oh. That is so me! I do that too! Maybe that's why it was always my favorite. I recognize a lot of myself in Daniel, the character played by Michael Shanks, more specifically, but yeah, I do that too. Dry with people. I love it. We don't really get the time to really start to panic about that when suddenly a bunch of Serpent guards enter the room and a big magic floating ball emerges from a crate and locks itself in the gate. And this is the part where the episode, of which there are multiple versions. There is a scene produced especially for Showtime, the network that Stargate was originally on. Apparently in 1997, Showtime wanted to create Stargate as an edgier, more adult TV show featuring more violence and more complex, darker themes with the occasional nudity, as we clearly saw in the pilot, for their subscribers. But Stargate became more of a broadcast syndicate, and therefore, after 5 seasons, Showtime declined to renew the show because it was not deemed worth the expense to their subscriber base, despite the show being quite popular. Thank God for the Sci-Fi Channel, who then picked up Stargate, giving us Season 6 and more, where we got to enjoy Stargate for 5 more years. Yay! Anywho, back to this exclusive Showtime scene. As we're being introduced to the floating metal ball, Tilk explains it as a Goa'uld long-range visual communication device, somewhat like our television, only much further advanced. Apparently in the Showtime version of this scene, O'Neill says to that, think he gets Showtime? Incidentally, my DVD also says that, so I don't know which version y'all are watching, but okay. For apparently in the other versions, O'Neill says, Goa'uld TV, which was a nod to The Simpsons, of which Richard Dean Anderson is a big-ass fan, and would have been the first of many in-jokes about The Simpsons, because keep a weather eye open, there will be many throughout the show's seasons. I really like it when O'Neill says, I always get a happy, tingly feeling when I see those guys, because I kind of have to agree about the Jaffa Stompies. It really was a smart move from the creators of the show to give them that extra layer of gravitas whenever they're around. One, it clearly signals they're coming, which, handy, but like he says, it kind of gives you this little tingly feeling, or at least I recognize that. Do you? Or is that just me and O'Neill? Wait, is this another weird kink? Well, listen alone, right? Although, wait, he's talking about seeing them. I'm talking about hearing them. Is he into furries? Right, to each their kink, I suppose. Whatever. Moving on. Daniel, in this moment, also learns how to keep your shit on you at all times when you're out on a mission. I guess he didn't learn that since he technically never got any military training, but luckily they aren't discovered. It just made the viewer clench their cheeks maybe a little. And for Daniel, lesson learned, I guess. It was a nice little added touch. Tilk tells them that the door handles might be concealed in the walls, and I loved this idea. To hide it in plain sight for the ones who know how to read hieroglyphics, or in this case, gold, especially when it turns out to be Apophis' actual hieroglyph. Loved that little attention to detail. Mwah. Back on Earth, they've gathered that SG-1 were the ones that went through the gate, and more specifically, where they went. And here, in true Brotherhood style, Ferretti offers to go after them. And I love Hammond for realizing his position. Bringing them back, which would be SG-2's official order, would only now result in a courts-martial for Carter and O'Neill. We might as well now let them have at it and see what happens. Now, he does say he's gonna think about it, which kind of bumped me out, but yeah. They do think about it, and then he does actually, at least, to send SG-2 after them, only then also to learn that the gate no longer works. At least, those coordinates no longer work. Which kind of makes you wonder, had they decided earlier, it maybe could have made a difference, or they would have just dialed in the moment that they were prepping that big floaty ball and it would have ruined everything. I mean, there are so many scenarios you can think of. I'm gonna stop myself now. Okay, moving on. But seeing as this is Ferretti's last scene in the show, it was a nice touch, to show that true brotherhood, wanting to go after them, obviously with the intent to help them and not bring them back for court martial. But yeah. As SG-1 is advancing, they come across a sarcophagus, not yet revealing who might be inside it, as we now also learn that they are on a ship traveling in hyperspace, it seems. A new concept for the show, and apparently also to Tilk? Yet he does seem to know about Hyperlawn. Make it make sense. He does say that he hasn't been aboard a ship like this, and that the acceleration is different from what he is used to, which could indicate that this is new Goa'uld technology. Now, looking back on it now, this seems to be one of those places where the writing bends Tilk's knowledge a little for the sake of the ultimate reveal of them being on a ship. Because, yes, I can buy that the Goa'uld keep information compartmentalized, and maybe Tilk wasn't really getting tours of every major ship Apophis owned, but seeing that he was Apophis's first prime and has already recognized Goa'uld ships like this before, it does feel a bit convenient how much he suddenly doesn't seem to know in this episode. What do y'all think? Because this was one of those things in this episode that multiple times made me think, what does he know? Because on the one hand, it seems like he knows a lot, and then at other times, he seems to know barely anything. And he wasn't just a foot soldier that defected, he was Apophis's first prime. So you would expect Tilk, as the first prime, to be a lot more intimately aware of Apophis's capabilities, right? Or is that just me? And in researching this episode, I saw a lot of people online commenting specifically on how odd it was that SG-1 could walk around the ship so freely. Yet I disagree. Why wouldn't they? They infiltrated an enemy base. Isn't that exactly how it goes? Also, Teal'c does point out that they need to leave the room of the sarcophagus as they are rarely left unattended for long, even when they don't feel threatened. It's kind of weird that it's parked in the cockpit, but I guess, with the Goa'uld being the pilot, presumably, mainly. Kind of sort of makes sense, but a lot of the arguments also were based around things that the show did later on, which when we get there, I will comment on that one. But no, I didn't think any of that was particularly odd. How about y'all? Share with us in the comments. I really want to know why it was that specific thing in researching the show that I kept coming across that people found odd about this episode. Of all the things to find odd, that was it? Okay. Well, I mean, they now do get discovered, right? So they didn't get to just skip around on the ship and not get detected at all. And I really love when O'Neill asks where the bathroom is. Such a classic. I was kind of surprised though that Carter's now doing the killing and Took does the cleanup with, that handy bonus to the Zat gun where a third shot disintegrates, which was also news to the rest of the team. Great reveal, Tilk. Nicely done. You really like that part because it really made you go like, oh, that's nice. But like I said, the writers and the producers hated it, so eventually they just ignored it. And we never saw it again. I appreciate it while it lasted, though. How about y'all? Where do you land on the usage and capabilities of the Zat'n'ktels? This also now shows them why the gate refused to work. And I really love Daniel's remark here now too, as I'll just go tell the pilot when they discuss on how they can't use the gate as long as they don't go back to the planet from which they can dial Earth, as now they are traveling at faster than the speed of light and the coordinates have changed. So the coordinates back to Earth have also changed. Dire circumstances, dry wit. My kind of people. And with dire circumstances, I do mean that this is basically also the time that the team fully realizes that they're no longer preventing a future attack. The attack is already underway, and this is where the fallout from politics, the previous episode, really hits. We all knew that the Goa'uld are the enemy, and that they were going to come for us sooner rather than later. But after Senator Kinsey unceremoniously shut the Stargate program down, this now painfully highlights that this whole thing is made so much worse. For now, not only do we see the urgency confirmed that the attack isn't just coming, it's coming now, but also that they are now there without any backup. There are 4 people on a ship trying to do damage control on something that should have been taken seriously from the get-go. And that truly drives home the point that this is what happens when people, the wrong people in power, straight up deny or bury the truth. Even when good people do step up, they are left trying to fix something that's already gotten far bigger than it needed to, which is also basically my core frustration in life. When you see things coming, no one seems to see what you see, they just steamroll right ahead, taking all of us with them, which is also why these kinds of shows are so important in my eyes. They, in an entertaining storytelling way, expose us to these real deep questions to really challenge our way of thinking, but also to inspire us to do the right thing. Not the easy thing, but the morally just, righteous thing that serves the collective and not just the elite few. To put the people and common sense above power, preferably while telling them to go fuck themselves. Or is that just me? Too much? Oh well. Anywho, moving on to a fun nerd fact. Carter calculates it'll take them at least a year to get to Earth, even traveling at 10 times the speed of light, which, after I did some math, comes down to 10.8 billion kilometers an hour or 6.7 billion miles per hour. Sounds really fast, huh? Seeing as the moon is only under 400,000 kilometers from Earth. So imagine you could be on the moon in 0.1 second and to Saturn in a little over 8 minutes. Awesome! Online, I also found someone saying that Captain Samantha Carter's estimate of the length of the trip at 10 light years is correct, and very generously, assuming that SG-1 spent 6 hours on the ship during this episode. I really wonder how you got that number, but okay. Which would mean that a Goa'uld ship would be capable of speeds up to at least 14,600 times the speed of light. That is like 16 trillion kilometers an hour, or like 10 trillion miles per hour. Holy Hannah. That sounds redonkulously fast. If you were traveling that fast, within an hour you would reach the Oort cloud from Earth, which is on the outer edge just past Pluto of our solar system. And seeing that Teal'c didn't correct Carter when she mentioned 10 light years and that it would take them over a year to get to Earth, that would mean that the Goa'uld hyperspace technology did a serious upgrade since Teal'c defected. Lordy. Next, we see the Serpent guards are taking the sarcophagus to a meeting in the gate room, where we saw them earlier install that telecommunication volley. The team witnesses now Apophis telling the Jaffa to listen to his son, Chlorel, and it's revealed that Skaara, aka Chlorel, was the one in the sarcophagus, upping the ante even more now by having the enemy wear the face of someone they love, causing the team to decide to split up. Carter and Daniel will plant C4 all over the ship to blow it up, as O'Neill and Teal'c try to grab Skaara. And I do commend the writers for having at least this talk, but at the same time, I was also a little struck by how cold Carter is, for she points out that O'Neill might be, possibly, acting under an emotional fog, and that it clouds his judgment. Yet O'Neill comes back, supported by Daniel, obviously as they love Skaara, stating that in taking Skaara, they could have success in getting through to him, which only gets aided by Teal'c reasoning that they are undiscovered so far, and there will be little reason to have Skaara under heavy guard, so they might actually be successful in capturing him. And like I said, the argument had to be made, and I think I am biased, because I really do love Skaara, but it was a little cold to say, really? Now? On this important mission, you want to take some time out to try and grab Skaara? Yes, we do. We love Skaara. But I see your point. Taken. Well, not taken. Noted. Well, no, technically it is taken because they do decide to split up. Like Carter and Daniel still focus on the mission, while O'Neill and Teal'c go on a side quest. What I notice now, in their initial attack, Chlorel seems arrogantly confident, and it isn't until more and more of his guards fall that we see him first getting worried and then angry. And we discover another use for the Zats. Look at that. Now you can also use it, apparently, to lock the door. And this whole scene, note, I know where all of this is going, and still I'm on the edge of my seat. I'm so invested. For despite O'Neill's best efforts to get Chlorel to let Skaara come forward, it takes O'Neill shooting him once with the Zat, claiming Skaara is a tough kid, which, I felt that. And, yeah, he is, for Skaara to actually make an appearance. Which kind of makes me wonder, is this why they introduced the Zat'n'ktels? Because it was the only way to get Skaara to come out in the first place. So to facilitate that conversation between O'Neill and Skaara, they had to think of something where they could get Skaara to come out to really tug at those heartstrings, but they overshot it like a trillion miles by writing themselves into a corner with all the awesome things that it could do. But that was a thought that only occurred to me after I rewatched, and then watched it again. For this is really one of those moments in the episode that really made a big difference. Up until now, we never found a way to suppress the Goa'uld even for a little while to get to talk to the host again. So it was a great idea, which apparently they greatly regretted later on, but like I said, we appreciate it while it lasted. And then after getting shot by the Zat, his first instinct being to call out for his sister and Daniel, and saying, O'Neill, it hurts. Aww. And then when he asks, are you still my friend? I mean, Is there a dry eye in the house, people? I felt my heart crack a little, especially when he then says, "Can you forgive me for what we are about to do?" And unfortunately, before we can get any of the details on that, Chlorel takes over and the Jaffa breach the room. And I couldn't help but notice that several times Christopher Judge almost knocks the wig off of Alexis Cruz's head. Like, you see it move freely. It must have been a bitch to wear that thing. It must have weighed a ton. Beautiful though. Like, it looked beautiful. But yeah, I wonder how often they had to retake that scene where they're struggling because the wig got shifted so much that they couldn't continue. Now we also see that maybe that little reappearance of Skaara emboldened him, because as O'Neill begs Skaara to help them, Chlorel does stop the Jaffa from killing them, claiming to want to hand deliver the traitor and his recruiter to Apophis. And I love this, and it's a constant throughout the show. O'Neill in captivity is always a delight. Here now having him say, "Hey Pops," to Apophis, I love it. When we watching this now, all I could thinking was, where's the remote for that thing? Like, Chlorel just kneels and suddenly, poof, there it is. Well, just a second before, we saw Carter and Daniel walking around the ball, Daniel even touching the telecommunication thingy. Nothing. But Chlorel walks in the room, kneels, and ta-da! It works. Like, those are the questions that I ask people. Can someone answer that for me? Because in rewatching this now, it really had me stumped. Teal'c is sentenced to a slow death by removal of his symbiote, and I want to commend the actor and the editor for timing this moment so beautifully well. For when Teal'c hears his sentencing, you see him give this nervous little swallow, which is the only chink in his armor that you see. Well played, good sir, and well edited. Good person, whoever edited. Kudos. It's subtle, but significant. And Chlorel is allowed to decide how he wants to kill O'Neill. Again, last minute, after pleading from O'Neill, Chlorel stops Teal'c's sentence from being carried out. He then takes them to the cockpit, or Peltec as he calls it, which you start to believe might actually be a possible act of kindness. I mean, he saved their lives now twice. But no, for Chlorel now shows them that they are already passing Saturn, meaning that they are already in our solar system. Meanwhile, Carter and Daniel are still under the illusion that they have a year, so they plan to try and rescue O'Neill and Teal'c by setting a timer in case of their capture for the C4 for 24 hours. And as my math showed, okay, granted they are out of hyperspace, but still, those fuckers are fast. We don't have 24 hours, people. We need a new plan. Back on Earth, we see that they are now well aware of the threat approaching, as Walter mentions to General Hammond that the Cairn Deep Space Radar detected the Goa'uld ships passing Saturn. And I'd never heard of this, which is apparently a very big nerd faux pas, because the Cairn Deep Space Radar turns out to be a tribute to the iconic 1990 episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, The Best of Both Worlds Part 2, in which the Enterprise detects a Borg cube passing Saturn on its way to attack Earth. I never knew that. Well, I never watched Star Trek, so of course I wouldn't know that. But now researching this episode, I discovered that. So sci-fi nerds must have loved this. I mean, I always love supernatural Easter eggs in any of the new shows the guys do. So inside jokes are always fun, right? When you're on the inside then, that is. Otherwise, they either go over your head or you go like, what? I commend the writers for adding this scene where they have General Hammond, though wearily it may be, express his gratitude that Daniel isn't here to watch this unfold and be forced to relive his worst nightmare for a second time. Which kind of makes you think that Hammond is of the belief that wherever they gated to, they must have just missed it, not knowing that actually, Team has a front row seat. Anyway, Earth is preparing for imminent attack as Carter and Daniel try to rescue O'Neill and Teal'c. In another gut-wrenching moment, Chlorel grips Daniel with his hand device. A hand device we all know by now slowly boils your brain. O'Neill is seen struggling, begging Skaara to stop. Even Teal'c yells out that O'Neill needs to act now, which leaves him with the gut-wrenching, heartbreaking, soul-destroying decision to either watch Daniel die or for him to kill Skaara. Which only hurt all the more when you realize that O'Neill is now being forced into another unbearable moment where gun violence is the cause of the death of a boy that he loves like a son. Still, O'Neill does end up shooting Skaara, and we have this little moment where Skaara actually seems to be at peace as he dies in O'Neill's arm. When Teal'c calls to O'Neill, who asks for a minute to grieve because, yeah, that one hurt, Teal'c responds with that there is no time, for they are now already approaching Earth. And as Carter tells them that the Death Gliders are preparing for launch, shit just got very, very real. As they zoom out, we see that next to Chlorel's ship, Apophysis' ship is there as well. So even if they now either let the timer run out or decide to blow up the C4 that they already planted across the ship, that would still leave Apophysis' ship. And this is how the episode ends. Talk about your fucking cliffhanger. And then we had to wait months for the conclusion. But at the same time, it also allowed us to really sit with that sting that started in politics and got carried over into this finale. For despite all of the opposition, SG-1 still acted, and we now see, even though they did the best they could under the circumstances, with zero support and very little strategy, and it still might be too late, which is incidentally also what I really loved about this episode. We all kinda guessed and now got actual confirmation that SG-1 was right all along. More right than even they knew, but still. But also that they didn't magically fix everything in this episode. Even though they did everything right, they did the moral, honorable, righteous thing, it still wasn't enough. And we have to sit with that. Okay, and then think about what I mentioned in the previous episode. We just saw Chlorel/Skaara die. Apparently, the fandom got so upset with this death, and I'm there with them. Like I said, I love Skaara. The writers decided to listen to the fandom and figured out a way to undo their oopsie. Even back then, like this is 1998, people. This is before social media and any of that. The writers listened to the fans and made us truly part of this experience. I loved learning that. Power fandom, people, nothing like it. And you know I can't leave y'all hanging. So I will be airing Season 2, Episode 1 next week. That's the fun part of an old show. We can just pop in the next DVD and keep on going.